Yesterday, we got even more evidence of just how intentionally criminal Donald Trump's actions appear to be. On Monday, one of the witnesses in this classified documents investigation, one of the witnesses came forward. And up until yesterday, we knew this witness only as Trump Employee 5. CNN is now reporting that his name is Brian Butler. He was a longtime employee at Mar-a-Lago, and he witnessed some incredibly damning things, like the day that Trump flew from Florida to Bedminster in New Jersey. Trump's body man and his co-defendant, Walt Nauta, asked Mr. Butler to get Mr. Nauta a big SUV, an Escalade. Butler then saw Nauta and Trump's other co-defendant, Carlos de Oliveira, load the vehicle up with 10 to 15 bankers' boxes and then drive them to Trump's plane and then load those bankers' boxes onto the plane. Mr. Butler said that all took place on June 3rd, 2022. Now, later that same day, one of Trump's lawyers provided investigators with what he said was the entirety of classified documents that remained in Mr. Trump's possession, as well as a sworn certification that falsely claimed on Trump's behalf that he and Team Trump had conducted a diligent search of boxes and all responsive documents had been turned over. So what Brian Butler is now asserting here is pretty explosive. Not only did Trump apparently hide away at least 105 classified documents that the FBI eventually found, it sure sounds like Trump managed to steal another 10 to 15 boxes of records, and we don't know if the FBI ever got those records back. Who knows where those boxes are now? That sure sounds like obstruction of justice. What is equally concerning here is why Brian Butler decided to go public right now. Here he was explaining his decision.
Well, I mean, it's been almost a year since FBI agents showed up at my house when my wife was at home. And, you know, over the course of the last year, emotionally, it's been a roller coaster. You know, a couple weeks ago, Judge Cannon says she's going to release the names of the witnesses. You know, you go from highs and lows in this. And instead of just waiting for it to just come out, I think it's better that I get to at least say what happened than it coming out in the news, people calling me like crazy. I'd rather just get it out there. And, you know, the hope is at least I can move on with my life and get over this.
Brian Butler coming forward here is brave. President Trump has a track record of trying to influence or intimidate witnesses who speak out against him. And his followers have a track record of harassing and threatening anyone they perceive to be one of Donald Trump's enemies. So coming out in this big public way is in itself a big deal. Any day now, the judge in this case, Aileen Cannon, may release the identities of unnamed potential witnesses, like witness number 5, which puts at least a dozen others like Mr. Butler at risk. Judge Cannon has yet to rule on whether she will release the names of those witnesses for the prosecution. She held a hearing 11 days ago on the matter. As far as that trial date, that is still very much TBD. Joining me now to discuss all of this is MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin. Lisa, it's always so wonderful to have you on set here to explain my continued confusion about what exactly is happening down in Florida.
First,
yeah, well, and other legal scholars.
Yeah.
What's Cannon going to do here? I mean, this seems like a very bad call just on its face. Witnesses should be protected, especially those who, you know, the president has a history of maligning, if not outright harassing.
It was really interesting. I was reading the transcript of the argument that you were just referring to earlier tonight, and Cannon clearly still has a leaning toward revealing their names. And she actually asked David Harbach of the special counsel's office verbatim, has there been any indication that any of these witnesses have been threatened? And his response was sort of incredulous, but then he said to her, well, that's not the standard, Your Honor. We don't have to show that a witness has been threatened in order to make a credible case to you that the revelation of their names would compromise this investigation as well as their public safety.
Do you feel like if she says no, Jack Smith takes this to the 11th Circuit?
I do. I think Jack Smith does take this to the 11th Circuit because it's not just about Brian Butler as Trump employee number 5, who has now unveiled himself willingly. There are 20 to 25 other witnesses, according to Harbaugh's estimation, that could be impacted. And it's not just their identities, Alex. I want to be clear with you and our viewers. It's about the substance of their expected testimony as well. There could also be communications between members of the prosecution team, between and among them about some of these witnesses. And some of them are incidental. Let's say they're talking about Lisa Rubin, a witness, and lower down in the chain, they're talking about Alex Wagner. You could end up having Alex Wagner's name out in the public domain, even though it's entirely incidental to the purpose for which that exhibit was used in these underlying motions. That is the subject of this unsealing order.
I do wonder when we talk about the sort of the most explosive elements of this interview with Mr. Butler, I was shocked at his account of helping to load 10 to 15 bankers' boxes that he said looked very much like the boxes storing classified documents that we've seen photos of in the indictment document, that those 10 to 15 boxes were loaded onto a plane and took off. To me, if I'm the special counsel, first of all, they knew this months ago. Yep. Why not continue looking for them? What does that reflect on the part of Jack Smith?
Well, first of all, we don't know that they haven't recovered them. It could be that they have determined that all of those boxes were returned to Mar-a-Lago or somewhere else, that they essentially followed Trump around wherever he went. I had a conversation with someone on your team tonight about our shared recollection that when Trump showed up in New York last year for a deposition in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud case, he was seen outside Trump Tower with personal aides carting some of those very same sorts of bankers' boxes. Look, there is a reference in the indictment to the fact that Carlos de Oliveira, Walt Nauta, and others shepherded boxes onto a plane as Trump was leaving from Florida to head north. It never disclosed, however, that Brian Butler, as Trump employee number 5, was among them, and we don't know for sure what happened to those boxes or what their contents were.
Do you feel confident, though, that I guess in the back of my mind, this is all pure speculation. I should warn everyone at home that, it seems that Jack Smith, probably more than anybody else at the Department of Justice, has understood the abbreviated calendar within which he is working, right? Like, he built a federal indictment on January 6th that was made for speed. Let's get it done. That is very much up in the air. The Mar-a-Lago classified documents case seems very narrow, very clear. He didn't bother with a dissemination charge, for example, saying that Trump was trying to sell these state secrets or spread them, if you will. That seems intentional, right? I'm going to go for the stuff I know I can convict on.
And by the way, he can still use evidence of some of this as proof of intent at trial, even if they don't lead to separate charges. So Jack Smith, to your point, I think has adopted a really surgical approach. He has probably also determined, based on his team's experience with Judge Cannon so far, that further superseding this indictment is to no one's benefit. That doesn't mean if and when this case were ever to be tried, that we wouldn't see some of the things that Brian Butler talks about in that interview come back and make a reappearance at trial, including through his testimony.
Right. I do think that there's been sort of a fatalist attitude about this because it's unlikely to happen before November, that people think it doesn't matter. But there's a 50% chance that Joe Biden is the president of the United States come the end of November, which means this trial could actually happen. I do wonder what you think the timeline might be for this, given Cannon's seeming indecision to actually set a date.
Well, look, I think a lot depends on what the Supreme Court does on presidential immunity. Trump has made multiple motions to dismiss in this case, 2 of which will be dealt with later this week. But presidential immunity is not one of them. And depending on what the Supreme Court does, this case could go away or it could come back to Judge Cannon to determine, even if he is immune for acts that are alleged to be official, does the stuff in this indictment count as official acts worthy of immunity? I would tell you, no, they are post-presidential acts that don't qualify. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is saying because they emanate from his lawful possession during his presidency, he is still entitled to cloak himself in the very comfy bathrobe of immunity.
So does that mean he gets to, go into the White House at any time, steal a bunch of stuff and say, I'm not going to ask you to actually answer that, but that seems to be what is suggested by an argument to Trump's merit. Lisa Rubin, it's great to see you, my friend. Thank you for bearing with my questions tonight. I appreciate you, as always. As the months go on, the list of Trump's transgressions, if not the list of his actual crimes, those lists continue to grow. And yet, for now, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case is on hold. And instead of talking about a trial in Congress, the focus instead is on President Biden, and not just how he handled classified documents, which as a legal matter is already settled. Instead, the focus is on Biden's age and whether he is fit to be president. The former special counsel himself played a huge role in that. His report made broad and seemingly unusual characterizations about Biden's age. And now one of the Congress people who questioned her today was Congressman Adam Schiff. Remember that before becoming a congressman, Schiff spent years as the assistant U.S. attorney for the Central District of California, meaning he is no stranger to how a prosecution like this should be run. He knows the rules, and he does not think the former special counsel has followed them.
Politics played no part whatsoever in my investigative steps.
But you understood, nevertheless,
the words
didn't you,
that I put in my report.
Mr. Hur, you cannot tell me you're so naive as to think your words would not have created a political firestorm. You understood that, didn't you? You understood how they would be manipulated by my colleagues here on the GOP side of the aisle and by President Trump. You understood that, did you not?
Congressman, what I understood is the regulations that govern my conduct as special counsel.
And those regulations
required me to write a confidential report for the Attorney General,
which you knew would not be confidential.
My decision, and that is what I did, Congressman. I followed the rules.
What is in the rules, Mr. Hur, what is in the rules is you don't gratuitously do things to prejudice the subject of an investigation when you're declining to prosecute. You don't gratuitously add language that you know will be useful in a political campaign. You were not born yesterday. You made a choice. That was a political choice. It was the wrong choice. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Joining me now is Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee and former lead House impeachment manager during the first Senate impeachment trial of then-President Trump. Congressman Schiff, it's great to see you. You, I think, made an impact today, shall we say, in your questioning of the former special counsel. And I just wonder what your assessment was after you asked him, I think quite credibly, whether he actually believed that this was not a political document or that he did not make any political considerations when assessing President Biden's memory. Did you believe him?
No, I didn't believe him at all. He tried to claim this was a confidential memo, but it was also forced to acknowledge he knew it would be made public. The Attorney General had made it clear it would be public. And the idea that he was required to give this, this personalized, prejudicial, biased, essentially broadside against the president, that was necessary to his report is absurd. He could have commented all he wanted on, the president's specific recollection as to this document or that document. That would have been appropriate. But he understands, having done dozens and dozens of depositions, witnesses are instructed if they don't remember something clearly, they should say they don't recall. There's nothing at all unusual about that. And to take this political potshot at the president during the midst of a campaign when he knows how it would be used was, grave abuse of prosecutorial authority, and he knows it.
I also felt like he sort of wanted to issue a backhanded, not quite indictment of the president. He refused. He got into a big back and forth with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal over whether or not the president was exonerated by his report. And he kept saying, I did not exonerate him. Why, if he wasn't going to charge him, do you think he refused to say, I do not exonerate him?
Well, I think you saw in the clip you played his reluctance to even read portions of his report that were critical of Donald Trump. My sense was what he decided to do was, lacking the evidence to make a recommendation to charge the president, he would do the next best thing, which is give them a political bludgeon, attack the president's memory, paint an unflattering portrait of him. That, in many ways, was more damaging than any observation he might have made about the facts or the chargeability of those facts. And so I think he has a tough time criticizing Trump. He may have future political ambitions. He doesn't want to alienate someone who might be president. He doesn't want to alienate the Republican Party. And so I think this is his effort, failing to find facts to charge or recommend charges to gratify the Trump crowd.
What do you make of the fundamental issue on display here, or the fundamental conclusion that I think is worth repeating over and over again? The vast vast gulf that separates what President Biden did versus what former President Trump did on the matter of classified document retention. Do you think Democrats made a forceful enough distinction, as it were, given all that Republicans had stored up, the political bludgeon, as you call it, to try and muddy the waters, to try and impugn President Biden's reputation, his age, and his fitness for office?
I think, yes. Madeline, I think, did a great job. Ted Lieu also went through, itemized a number of the charges against Donald Trump, the actions of Trump in concealing materials and trying to get people to lie about it, and talking about scrubbing the server that had the surveillance footage on it. In all these respects, just night and day with President Biden's not deliberate effort to retain documents, with his full cooperation, with his lengthy interviews. It was a sharp contrast. I think Democrats made that contrast. But I also think that it became clear watching her respond to questions that this is not some neutral, objective, nonpartisan prosecutor. This is someone who was a Republican appointee who really found it difficult, even though, as you say, it was his own words, to read from his own report in ways that would be critical of Donald Trump. And so I think the public got a sense of who he is, where he's coming from, that this is not a neutral arbiter.
Independent of what Republicans and former special counsel Hur have to say about it, I do wonder how much of an impact the latest developments out of the classified documents case, how much of an impact do you think that's going to have with the American public as we head into an election season where we may not get any of the federal criminal trials? They may not happen before the election. We have a witness coming forth and saying that not only did Donald Trump retain over 100 classified documents at his residence, he may have actually stolen 10 to 15 bankers' boxes more and, sent them to points north or wherever. Do you think that that has the impact that it necessarily should? Or do you think that there has been some false equivalence made between Biden taking things, regardless of the fact that it wasn't criminal, and what Trump did? I mean, do you think that the sort of transgressions of that case have lost their impact in the court of public opinion?
I don't think they've lost their impact, but as the indictments were some time ago, I think it is valuable to remind people of these egregious facts. And I think Mr. Butler coming forward, particularly, as you say, given that the trial doesn't look like it's going to go forward before the election, to say, hey, the president was involved in hiding these classified materials. I was asked in a very strange, suspicious way to load or help load these boxes of documents. On the same day, it turns out the president's lawyers are meeting with the Justice Department to go over these classified materials. Lord knows what happened to all of these documents, or some of these documents. I thought Mr. Butler's statements also about having this billionaire foreign person talking about Russian and other submarine capabilities or U.S. capabilities, the astonishment that the president would talk to some, wealthy, and I don't know whether this is a donor or just wealthy patron at Mar-a-Lago, shows you what a national security risk that whole Mar-a-Lago enterprise was. Donald Trump's willingness to discuss, to show photographs of things to different parties that were potentially classified materials. It's terrifying to think of him getting classified briefings now. And I really hope the agencies dumb it down so they don't share anything with the president that they don't want shared with the world.
Yeah, only material that's published, I don't know, in the New York Times or Washington Post or the LA Times. That he probably won't read either. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for making the time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.